Okay, so thought it'd be cool to go through a walkthrough of this image. Now that I'm pretty much done with it, at least for now, and I'm gonna move on to another one. Finally, it's been like a week, probably more, uh, but a lot of learning through this one, so and experimentation. Pretty happy with it. Probably happier with this than most of the other photographs I've worked on so far. So it is December 12th, 3:18 in the morning, of course. Just got done playing video games again, which I played too much of today. And we had football Sunday, which is everybody comes over for football, and the Seahawks lost. And that's all I want to talk about in regards to that. Anyway, um, okay, so this again was captured in July of 2009, back when Jen and I went on a trip to Montana, our first trip to Montana. And uh, this is in Glacier National Park in an area where there's a lot of waterfalls. Don't remember the exact location, but it's one of the, prominent like hikes that you can do out there. So this was one of the main captures that was taken from just from the camera after doing just minor Lightroom adjustments. Um, and what I did was I composited several images. And those are these. And what's interesting is that they had different exposure lengths, and you can kind of tell by the water here. And basically, I just brought them in. This is probably the one that had the longest exposure. And what's interesting is that I'm pretty sure I put a polarizing filter as well to get some of the richness, the color in the rock. And because of the longer exposure, a lot of the wispiness from the water kind of subsides, and you get more color as well. Um, and I like this for the effect it has on the waterfalls. But um, this effect here, where the pool gets captured over a long exposure time, you know, it looks very, kind of makes it clearly a photograph, um, like a long exposure photograph. So that's where I got the idea to, kind of incorporate some of these other photographs that were taken at shorter exposure times. Now this photo was also taken as a darker exposure, and what's key about this one is that this one at least gives a hint of what was going on with the light. And I've always found that when you're taking photographs in the field, just because of the dynamics of light and how cameras work, um, you know, doesn't always capture what it was like there in terms of the light, and also just what it felt like to be there. So that's where, especially this uh, exposure, really made it clear that there was a lot that could be brought back in terms of the lighting. So um, basically, the job here was to work on masking these guys, these composites in fairly seamlessly. See that, decisions were made to bring in elements or not. Look at that mask, that's kind of funny. Uh, but this gives you a sense. um, I used a darker exposure for the corner down here and kind of the edges to kind of bring those back down. Okay, so that was kind of the first part. And so now I've got a composite. Uh, you can see that kind of married those different exposures together. What was interesting was that they were actually taking it at, let's go back to that, different focal lengths. So this one was actually zoomed in, but as I zoomed out, uh, you know, was I guess that this is probably something that was really cool about the lens that I used, which I think was the Canon L lens 24-105. It kept the distortion down, and probably because it's a constant aperture lens that the distortion doesn't change much. I think, um, you know, so I think that's why I was able to take the wider picture and then take a zoomed in picture and composite them in. And actually, when I was in the field, I don't know what I was doing. I actually thought this was a final composition, but in terms of when I saw the two exposures, I just liked how this. I wanted to bring some of this stuff back in because it really framed the photo well, especially this corner here and this step here. Just felt would be really important elements to the picture. So let's go with that. So the next step was just this is kind of what I usually do is just start working on the light, the contrast, and the tone, overall tone for the image. And I was already trying to go for a little bit more of a subdued and a little moody kind of feel. Then I moved on to some dodging and burning. First thing was to fix that there. Next step was to just kind of enhance, I guess, the yeah, it's almost like it brought in a little bit of a vignette, and then started to bring in some elements that would be the foundation for the light coming through. So that was the dodge layer. And then I added, this I did later actually, but this mid-tone contrast bump, what it did to the photo, especially later as I added the other pieces, is that it kind of just, for me, it took, the only thing I could think of was a metaphor, like when you have a really good written piece, but it still has too many words, and you edit it down to be much more concise, kind of made the photograph more concise. Like the elements that needed to pop out just popped out a little bit more. The elements that needed to go back into the foreground went back into the background, went receded a little more to the background. So the kind of the major elements just popped out more, and photography is, I think Robert Rodriguez likes to say that, which I like, is that it's just chaos, and you're trying to distill something from all this chaos that's going on in the real world. Uh, so, all right, and then this has become a pretty key step in my workflow, which is that I take it into Nick Effects, Silver Effects Pro, and in a sense, kind of look at the photograph. Here, I'll show you luminosity in black and white. There's some weird stuff going on. Oh, because, and then ask myself, in a sense, does this work as black and white? That's to look at, kind of look at it through the eyes of like an Ansel Adams type of zone system. Is there good enough contrast? Is there good spread of all the different tones? Rich blacks, white whites, nice distribution of midtones. Um, and then I use that to impact the luminosity, which is basically the brightness of the different aspects of the photograph. Uh, I'm going to turn this off right now because then we can kind of really see what happened chronologically. Um, so I had that. I think I did this just to kind of enhance the pool a little bit more. And I used I bumped this overall down to 55%, but then I liked the 100% impact on the pool, so kind of brought that back up. Okay, so then I just did a little bit of touch-ups to, you know, just to remove some, usually highlights and have some distracting elements, and so you can kind of see remove some stuff and fix some stuff there, just with some simple cloning and healing. Overall, pretty minor, but it just cleans up some visually distracting stuff. Okay, so from there, did another kind of set of dodge and burning, and this is where, I think it's worth mentioning that um, what the way, it's kind of like a back and forth conversation that goes on between me and the scene or the photograph, just emotionally. And it's like, as I'm developing it, it's just kind of like, okay, well, what's next? And so, um, you know, it's not all planned, it's very spontaneous, but, there's just the only thing I could like it to is just when you're like kind of doodling around on a guitar or a ukulele or something, and something just starts to emerge. You make a change, and then it impacts something in terms of memory or emotional response, and it gives you the idea to start, to look at other stuff. So, it's, I mean, there's kind of an overall vision, but certainly there's a meandering route that sometimes, is U-turns, sometimes is dead ends, uh, but just kind of keep at it. Okay, so did another dodge. I did another burn layer to darken, and I remember that I was really trying to go for this being in shadow and this being in light, uh, and kind of burning in the shadowy areas. And I know that I put this through a mask to kind of protect the highlights and kind of just make the overall effect a little bit more subtle. Uh, See that this is where started to, hey, it'd be cool if I had some light coming in through here. And so this is where I added in those highlights, and then these were to warm up that light, and some more dodging and burning. So you see there's a lot of playing with light elements, and they're all done on different layers. Okay, so now this is really where the light starts to come in. And there was some experimentation with uh, different approaches for rays, and ultimately went with this one. And that was kind of just a more constant effect. And this is where, I started paying in some of that warmer colored light. Uh, and, a little bit of this was just artistic impression, interpretation, you know. Just thought it'd be nice to tell a story like this. And, the light was behaving like this. And so I just thought it'd be nice to kind of give the photograph a real emotional bump. And this is probably one of the favorite things I did. Now, this was total artistic liberty, but I just decided that, you know, I miss fly fishing a good bit. When you go fly fishing, and you go in the morning or in the evening, usually I go in the evening because I'm not a morning guy, clearly, um, and you see bugs doing their thing. And I just like the idea of this being kind of like an evening, situation where, but there's bugs in the middle of their hatch. So you could barely see this in the final printout, but for me, it's there. And I've always seen that you see this, which I think is just so cool. Bugs flying, doing their mating thing, and so I totally painted this in, but just a little artistic liberty that I added into the photograph, and barely see it. It actually looks like moss on the rocks, but makes me happy. Little bugs. Bob Ross had his little trees. I have my little bugs. Okay, so this is just some color adjustment, yeah, to kind of get the hue of that light ray to be a little bit warmer. And then this is where it really bumped in the light coming in through here, where the warm golden hour light is hitting the water. I this was a new experiment for me that I didn't know quite how to do, but then it just dawned on me to use a luminosity mask and, in a sense, paint the color through a luminosity mask. Just makes sense. A little before and after. Yeah, that really gives it nice contrasts, I think, between this that's in light and that's in shadow. So it really brings out the depth, I think, that is in this scene with these rocks, because that's what's so kind of, I think, just so cool about the way this waterfall is structured. Is like, it's kind of like a staircase, and it's one of the things that I probably was so inspiring about going to Glacier, and why it's particularly special to me is that um, there's another part of Glacier which uh, is kind of at the top of the pass, which is called Logan's Pass, I think, at the top of the or the midpoint of the Going to the Sun Road at its highest elevation. There's just this boardwalk hike that, this is in some other photographs that I did, and I just remember feeling like, oh my God, I'm literally on my way walking towards heaven. That's just the feeling that it kind of evoked. It was just, it was just so beautiful. And um, and so, in a sense, this theme kind of got repeated because I've always, I don't know, I remember there's this movie with Robin Williams, I think, What Dreams May Come. And there's just a scene where, again, it's like this heaven thing, this theme, where they're all hanging out and there's a staircase. And whenever I've tried to reimagine that in my head, the stairs are kind of more naturally formed and there's water. Um, and To me, this kind of a cascade that almost looks like a natural staircase is my particularly favorite type. So you can just kind of imagine yourself climbing up through it and just sitting in certain areas. That's why I wanted to reincorporate this area, because I wanted the viewer, you, to just kind of find a place to perch in the frame. Uh, I like that better than actually having a person there, because then the person, like, well, it's not you, and then it becomes distracting. Who's that person? And blah, blah, blah. So, anyway, I think this point was the turning point where I really fell in love with this photograph and how it developed. Okay, then the next step was to just add some, I think, some slight color to the shadows. And I'm still trying to go for that story where the light's coming through here, and part of it's clearly in shadow, and part of it's in light. Now, the effect is pretty subtle, but I didn't want to overdo it either. So, okay. Now, I also came to realize that this area here, because it's mostly pulled from a longer exposure, the mist actually from the water doesn't get exposed because the water is moving, or like the mist is moving, so it doesn't. And it's just like a 1 second exposure, it's almost like it disappears. It become, so I felt like I should bring it back in to know it was there. And I just took some textures that I found and just added that in. And again, kind of brought it in to also emphasize uh, that play of light and shadow. So you could see that I did that with various masks. And then I also realized may as well add some up here as well. And I mean, it's subtle, but I think it really adds to it. And this is where the photograph was really starting to come together. And then I noticed that this was, because of the compositing, this doesn't make sense. It's almost like the water's glowing. So brought that in. Oh, and then I think I'm a, this was later in the process, but I fixed this area. That's what this layer was, but it's already propagated through. So, uh, but there's just little things that you have to, you find and over time become a little bit obvious. And so that's what I fixed there. Uh, Added an Orton effect, but did it so that the Orton effect is applied further in the distance, because it's like where the misty stuff starts to happen. And but I like it when I don't like to apply Orton across the board. Um, I like the foreground to be pretty sharp. Uh, okay, so oops. Okay, so this is actually where the photo kind of uh, came at was at this point, and let's see here. Oop. So then added a gradient mask, and this was to just apply some color theory and kind of harmonize the colors in the photograph. Um, and you know, it's okay without it, but I just thought it'd be nice to just apply something actually that I learned, and this kind of I think has the effect of marrying, the shadow and the highlights together a little bit more pleasing palette. Uh, oh yeah, and there's the thing that needed to be fixed. This corner here. So I think here, just fix the leaf color up there, and just did some more dodging and burning. Uh, Brought the shadows back a little bit here, and then that's how I fixed this highlighted area here. Just brought the color down so it matches this, and it just looks correct. Uh, Here this is where we applied the mid-tone contrast bump. And I guess I applied this earlier before too. But anyway, this is actually where that layer, that change, that kind of, like I was saying, made the image a little bit more concise in terms of what I was trying to say. You see, there's quite a difference. The way it looks to me is like tones just kind of grouped together a little bit more cohesively. And then after that, all I did was, these didn't do anything, just some saturation adjustments, mainly to here, a little bit around here, some areas, but the main focus was to really bring this emerald color out. And then after that, the main thing is just uh, sharpening. It's a basic sharpening layer, which you probably can't see. And then some creative, I do this where I create some almost exaggerated sharpening just to create some focus points, you know. Because it kind of, the eye jumps around and I just want to have some areas that I really want to call attention to. Not too many, but the sharpness is actually what, I think catches the eye. It's like, so it kind of moves, starts from here, moves this way, moves it up. I think that's pretty cool. At some point, I like that I added these elements for the light. It is like light bleeding through here, through these branches and stuff, and then hitting uh, I guess, what are they, ferns or something? I don't know, just plants, like salal or something. Whoa! Okay, I got a really good look at him. Come on, come on. Oh, and now Photoshop or something is acting weird. Oh, okay. And that's it. I hope I didn't screw something up. Good, yeah, it looks the same. So, that's just a walkthrough. Uh, yeah, really happy with it. Learned a good bit. Applied some stuff for the first time. Uh, particularly the mid-tone contrast bump stuff, saturation painting, um, a lot of the Tony Kuiper stuff that I learned kind of got applied here for the first time. Um, so there you go. Hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, it's 26 minutes, almost the same amount of time as your average Bob Ross episode.